I also want to thank Professors Dahl and Schutte for helping to organize the LABash team, Nick Mitchell, Esteban Waltz, and Cami Mahan. I really appreciate all that you guys have done and your team has done to make this a success. It really will be a success. I think it's actually setting the bar high for FIU, but I know those kids as well, and they're going to do an extraordinary job. And I want to apologize just a little bit in advance to Johanna and Juan and Damien and Safra and my friends from FIU who I just spoke to about a month ago. They were my guinea pigs for this particular presentation. So you'll see a little bit that will be redundant, but I've tried to switch it up in true OLIN style at the last minute to make things a little bit more interesting. Let's see. I've just sort of modified the title to Systems and Suppositions, just to talk about the sort of bigger picture of landscape architecture and all the component parts that go into it. And just to give you a sense of what OLIN is about, we're a kind of fine group of partners who practice the discipline of landscape architecture and urban design under a common mission statement, which is to create places that enhance life. And when you give yourself a sort of big, bold vision like that, it gives you the opportunity to try to create places that are infused with your own design sensibilities, but under this common umbrella, they meet certain criteria. And for us, that's really about making fine landscape architecture that deals with the economic, environmental, and social sustainable issues, but that is lasting. It is contemporary, but not faddish, and will be with us for generations. So that really kind of defines how we approach our work, and in large extent, it is to be enjoyed under the condition of really social sustainability as the sort of first tier. We're about 60 designers in Philadelphia and a small pod in Los Angeles that we've just started up. So if some of you folks are interested in moving to Los Angeles, give us a call because we're really pushing that. It's an absolutely, I thank Nick for mentioning the fact that we are a very social group. It's very important for us to look to prospective colleagues, that is the people that we hire, to be collegial and convivial and really strong designers and interested in social purpose and capable of thinking creatively and infusing their design into the bigger picture, whatever it is we're creating at every level. So our studio is an old ballroom in Philadelphia. It's got 24-foot ceilings. It looks out over Independence Mall, which is right there, the cupola. It's kind of a fun space. That's a picture that I like to show because, in fact, this studio will never be that clean again. And in fact, this is a slide I like to show to just talk about what the nature of our studio is like and how I came to practice there. I'm actually 20 years into practice. I graduated from the GSD, as Nick said, and came down to OLIN because I appreciated what they had to do or what they spoke about with regards to the social context of landscape, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But my desk used to be right there. I've just recently moved to a different location, but the thing that I liked about OLIN when I first came to interview, I should say, I was asked by my mentor at the GSD, Peter Rowland, who had his practice outside of New York City. He asked me to come down and interview there, and because he wanted me to come work there, and I was very proud of the fact that somebody wanted me to work somewhere, because it was the first Bush recession. You know, it was 1990, and I was one of 3 classmates who ended up getting a job that year. It was very tough, but this guy wanted me to come down, and I was honored, so I went down and looked at the studio, and I walked in, and it was immaculate, and I said, wow, thanks for cleaning up for me. This is really nice of you to do that. And he said, oh, no. At the end of the day, every drawing gets put away, and at the beginning of the day, every drawing comes out. And I knew immediately that I couldn't work there because I'm a pig. You know, I really, this is, you know, it's this clean for the photograph, and I have a very horizontal filing system on my desk. I know where everything is. You can ask for anything from me, and I can find it, but it is a mess. And whereas the kid that's sitting next to me has an immaculate desk, not because I make him do that, it actually happens to be a Purdue person right now, but because that's his style. And the nature of our studio is that it is welcoming of everyone, a very diverse group of people from all over the world, from all over American universities, Purdue, Penn, Harvard, or UVA, Auburn, Berkeley, and then folks from Turkey, from Germany, from other distant locations, Japan. And the thing is, the reason why we want that diversity is because everybody brings to the design process something of themselves. And this is very important at OLIN. I may set the design vision as a partner there, but I ask my teams to actually inform it. So if I say, this is what I see in my head, this is what this could be, I invite people to actually inform it. And whether you're just out of school or whether you've an associate there who's been there for a number of years, I ask for that part, that method in terms of the design process. And it makes for a very exciting place because the kid who's sitting next to me may be just out of school, and behind me there's a graphic designer, and to my left is our librarian, and across the way from me is somebody who's been practicing for 10 years. And we do this purposefully. We try to make it so that nobody with the same experience level sits next to each other. The idea is that you can turn to somebody and say, I don't know how to do this. Help me. And they'll help you. And so somebody asks me, what's the appropriate size for this bench? I want it to be really comfortable. I want to figure out how to make this place very purposeful, and I'll have a dialogue with them. And meanwhile, I'm trying to fix my computer and can't get something to work, and I turn to the kid who's really much better at it than I am and say, help me, and they come and help me. So it's a very dynamic environment, and we like it that way. The thing that's very interesting about OLIN, I think, and one of the reasons why I went there is because it's a teaching studio. It is a studio where it's kind of an atelier. It was founded by two professors from Penn, Laurie Olin and Bob Hanna. And teaching has become an integral part of the studio, and we all teach in some way, not just externally. I mean, I taught at SciArc last year, the first landscape architecture studio, along with two of my partners. And I taught at UVA last fall, and two of our colleagues are professors at Penn. And but it's not about just teaching outside of the studio, it's about teaching inside of the studio. So we have a mentorship program as well. Somebody might come in from, say, Purdue, and they have in their mind that soon they want to be a teacher. Well, we'll track them in that direction. The idea is to take everybody who comes into the studio and identify where they want to go, whether it's stay with OLIN, whether it's they want to try different firms, or whether they want to go off and do something else. We help them get to that, even though we know that we might be sending them somewhere else. But that's the nature of our studio. Some of our folks have gone on to be chairs at UVA, chairs at Harvard, started their own practices. So it's, as I said, a very interesting place where also the act of drawing is still valued. And I've had the pleasure of listening to Charles Waldheim yesterday and to Patrick Doherty yesterday evening. And those two conversations resonated with me a lot. And I'll cite a couple of things for them. But this act is very important to us. We're very good at drawing with computers. I mean, don't get me wrong. But the act of drawing with pencil as well is an incredible stimulus. You should be able to move your mouse in the same way that you move your pencil. And the act of putting pencil to paper creates cognition. That is, if you can draw it, you can build it. And so when you begin to explore these things that way, it becomes powerful as a tool to think about what landscape can be, what your project could be. This is also an incredible social tool for us. Say it's, we're doing this drawing, and you bring people out of the monitor of their computer and actually invite them to have conversation while they're drawing. So not only are they learning to think about what it is they're about to build or design, they're actually having a conversation. And I don't care whether the conversation is about that project. It actually shouldn't be. It might be about what movie was playing last night, or what you did. You went to the ballet, or you did something else. But it is part of that socially purposeful effort that becomes imbued into our work. And as I said, the social sieve, that is that act, that thinking about the relationship of how people might come into a landscape and experience each other, is incredibly important, and it starts with the act of drawing. Charles, if you attended the Charles Waldheim talk yesterday, he talked about where we are as landscape architects, and I have to tell you, you kids are poised for greatness. Landscape architecture is an extraordinarily exciting discipline right now. It is like no other profession out there. It is at the center of so many different things. And I went to a liberal arts school for my undergraduate, Connecticut College. And at that school, you had to begin to focus on what you wanted. For me, it was the fine arts and art history. I was a painter and I was an art historian. And, but you had to take classes in other disciplines like government and chemistry and for me, Italian. And you wrote papers about those disciplines from your point of view, that is, from your major's point of view. So I would take government classes and write about Platonic philosophy and the art of the Koroi. And so I was looking at governance, but through my own background. And that really gave me an opportunity to explore a whole bunch of these things and to be able to have a conversation as a landscape architect to many different people, not necessarily with a great deal of depth, but with enough understanding about where they're coming from to engage them. And that's what you have to do as a landscape architect, because this discipline is at the focus of so many other disciplines out there right now. And you have to be able to have conversations with engineers, with planners, with building architects. You have to be a social anthropologist. You have to be competent with horticulture, understand the ecological systems. There's so much that you have to do as a landscape architect, or at least be able to know what you don't know and know how to ask the question of the person whose specialty that is. And landscape architecture is about all of these things. It is purposeful in all of these directions. So the capacity to be able to move your work in that way is an incredibly powerful tool. And if the 20th century was about building architecture, the 21st century is about landscape architecture. It is about all the connective elements that join us together as a society. So you better be prepared to be powerful people. Take control, be leaders out there. It's an extraordinarily great gift that you're getting from your education right now, a great tool. You may know our work. This is a seminal project from OLIN, Bryant Park in New York City. If you watch Project Runway or Sex and the City or whatever New York programs there are, you've seen this place. But it wasn't always what it is now. It was more like this, which is a system that had broken down. It was a needle haven, a place where people went to shoot up and to do drugs, and nobody would go in there. You could see that the natural systems were not working. There was no drainage. Things were falling apart. No one wanted to be there. And we went in with social anthropologists like Holly White and changed it. We made it visually accessible. We made it engaging. We allowed it to become something powerful as a tool for urban development. And indeed, as the New York Times cites, what was once anathema is actually an incredible marketing tool. Landscape architects are powerful people. We created an economy here that actually increased the value of every surrounding property exponentially and made this the most attended park in the city of Manhattan. That's a great thing, folks. I mean, you have that power, and that's an extraordinary thing where many different types of people can come together in very casual circumstances. And one of the things that I like about this particular project is one of the first to have movable chairs in a public space. And that's an incredibly interesting thing, that it wasn't about fixed furnishings. It was about actually finding a chair that might be in perfectly dappled light where you want to be. But I dare any of you to watch somebody approach one of those chairs. They're going to walk up behind it, even if it's in the perfect position, tweak it 3 degrees, and sit down in it. And that tweaking of 3 degrees actually makes it their own. It's the most democratic process. And I think that that's what's extraordinary about landscape architecture, is that it's the most democratic discipline in our country. It's a place where everyone will participate. It's very different from building architecture, where you create buildings for specific types of people, right? There are very few buildings that actually are completely of the people, with the exception potentially of a library or some other structure, but even then you have to want to seek knowledge. Landscape architecture is about building envelope to building envelope. It's the space in between everything, and that's where we all belong. And it's that entire aspect of the connective element, the thing that binds us all together. So whether you're overprivileged or underserved, you have a place there. That's an incredibly powerful thing. You have a place in landscape architecture, in the connective element. So, you might come here with millions of people watching a movie in the summer evenings, or this is one of my favorite shots of Bryant Park. It's a New York Times photograph. This is actually the best little bit of social anthropology I think there is in terms of a photograph. It is everybody being together alone, right? Look at the space that people give themselves, whether they're in clusters together or an individual out there. There's kind of an equal amount of open space between them. So they've all found that position relative to each other where they feel comfortable. And I think that that's fascinating in terms of the human aspect of our work. Landscapes are incredibly complex things, right? They are multiple systems coming together for great purposes. So at Robert F. Wagner Park, the before and after, this was part of the landfill that was created by the construction of the World Trade Towers. They just sort of dumped it into the Hudson River and expanded Manhattan. But it became something wonderful when we designed Wagner Park. We construct soils now. We understand what it means to actually create living systems. And that's one of my favorite things about landscape architecture. It's the balance between living systems and static systems, right? Buildings are about static systems largely. You put them up and they begin to fall apart once you finish. Landscapes are very different than that. You build them, but they're this balance between static and living systems that entropy sets in, but actually there's change that takes place over time. So we design for our landscapes for our grandnieces and grandnephews hundreds of years from now, right? It's a very different thing than building architecture. So what was constructed soil becomes place. We've also been finding that, and this is one of our specialties at OLIN, the development of landscapes over structure and the need to begin to create what seems to be terra firma with static systems that run, dynamic static systems that run underneath. So, following in those places like Canary Wharf in London, which is an entire district of the City of London that has actually a second level to it, even though you don't even realize that. Tertiary spaces in cities are becoming incredibly important, and they always will be to your practices. The places that are residual to cities, where like railroad tracks and parking garages, the roofs of parking garages will become part of your practice, and you have to become capable of designing with those. The exploration of our waterfronts, more and more people are finding their way back to rivers and understanding what it means to bring people to that context successfully. Whole portions of cities that have to be redesigned with connective tissue so that they become successful spaces for people to live and breathe and be healthful. And then understanding also that the public process is incredibly important to design. Being able to speak to people clearly, to be able to guide them in terms of a vision. Say, help them understand that what we are working on is benefiting them in the long run is an incredibly powerful tool. Being able to align them towards a common vision and helping them get there, but listening to them and understanding what they're saying. And then finally, because it's such an interesting time for us right now, some really prophetic reading that's out there in terms of how our world can be and how we as landscape architects can inform that world. So I just thought I would take you through a few projects. I'm going to talk kind of quickly because I know we have other things to do today. But I thought I would start first in Philadelphia, our hometown, with a project that's underway there. This is the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. This is a Frank Furness building. There's our city hall. Like Indianapolis, close to here, we're a quadrant city, at the center of which is our city hall. This is a famous building. It's an extraordinary institution. It's the United States' first art academy and museum. And it's the least attended institution in the city of Philadelphia. No one goes there, and it's because it's out of the beaten path. But something extraordinary has happened, which is the expansion of our convention center, which I'll talk about in a second. But they called me a few years ago and said, can you do something for us? We really want to be more visible. And I said, absolutely, we can put something together. We'll figure out how to make this work. And they said, well, can you do it for $25,000? And I said, absolutely not. We cannot do that for $25,000. We were kind of stumped. And they said, well, I turned back and I said, well, we can do it for $75,000, though. I think we can make this work. And this is what we proposed. We sort of looked at the interior, the fantastic interiors of Furness's building, and found some schemes that we really liked, and decided that we would sort of pull them out. And using some of that great new German street paint helped them to capture the corner. We said, all right, well, you can own this corner. We'll convince PDOT that this is capable of being done, and we'll do that with you, and we'll set up banners, and every quarter of the year you'll have one of your artists design a set of banners. It'll be sort of honorific, and you'll display new identity every so often. And we'll take the paving system that you have in front of the Academy, and we'll inscribe it with art, action, verbs, and famous alum, so that when people are walking through the city, and you have to think about the fact that how people walk through cities, they don't actually walk facing forward, really. They sort of walk looking down. You know, you're sort of walking and you're not really knowing where you're going and just sort of see things. And the idea was that you would see these art action verbs and suddenly have an association with what was taking place in that institution. This was our proposal to them for $75,000. We included some light fixtures in the ground, and they didn't do it because they got some interesting news, and that is that the Pennsylvania Convention Center, which is opposite, was going to expand, and their front door was going to be opposite their front door. And so all of a sudden, after the construction of this convention center, this small arts institution would go from having no one know where it is to having hundreds of thousands of people opposite it. And so they called back, and they said, how can you link us to Philadelphia's Museum Mile? So here's that city hall that I pointed. There's the PAFA campus, and that's Cherry Street. And this is our Benjamin Franklin Parkway, which is kind of our Beaux-Arts intrusion into the stately Quaker grid of Philadelphia. And we decided, okay, well, we're going to link you to the Ben Franklin Parkway this way, and at the same time create a connection between yourselves and the convention center, and actually create a campus out of a very small portion of a street that we could close. And we got permission to close the street, and we created this plaza. The idea is actually that it's kind of like a bowling alley, actually. It's very long and narrow. And our goal was to sort of create a carpet out of the paving to, there's a huge vent that's here going down to the subway. And so we had to create keep the free area connection between it. So it's not a mechanical vent, but you still had to create airflow. So we put this seat bench platform kind of thing there. We created this very beautiful sinuous bench that then related to a sculpture opportity. They're building a cafe, and they've hired Claes Oldenburg to do this iconic paintbrush symbol, the paint torch, by Angel's Brush. It's actually now called Paint Torch. It's a very narrow corridor, about 40 feet wide, and so you have to get a lot of stuff into 40 feet that's, it's 40 feet wide, 200 feet long. Not a great social space, but you try to figure out how to push and pull to make things happen. This is the opposite end of the Oldenburg, where we've created this position for a moving exhibit that will happen. We'll have artists come once a quarter to display. But at the same time, we wanted to invigorate it with some new technology. The idea is that art is no longer necessarily about the paintbrush. It's also about video and about other component parts. And because this is an American institution of art, we had this notion that we could inform it with video. So for people like, Jenny Holzer and Bill Viola. And so this video bench became a part of it, facing the cafe. And the idea is that it will be always changing, and that PAFA's new video art discipline, which is part of their new program, will also be able to be displayed here. So we're very excited about what this might be. It's actually broken ground, and they had their ribbon cutting, but instead of a ribbon cutting, they had these huge paintbrushes, and we dabbled on canvases. And this is it under construction. So this will be done by the fall in October. So when you're in Philadelphia, please come down and visit it and see how we do with it. It's going to be a great challenge, many obstacles. I also wanted to throw in something about Wishard, because we're so close to Indianapolis. Those of you at Purdue or at Ball State, this might be a project that you want to follow over the next couple of years. Wishard Hospital is a public hospital. It's a catch-all hospital. It's sort of the last resort of health in Indianapolis and its region. And as some of you may know, about a year ago, maybe two, Matt Gutwein, the CEO of Wishard, convinced people to vote for a $700 million, I think, bond that would support this hospital to move its campus. And it's very unusual for a hospital campus to actually move. Most of the time, hospitals just butt off of each other, and they sort of become these massive corridors of places that you can't figure out. It's like a mousetrap. But he called OLIN, and I picked up the phone in this case, and we had a great conversation. And what was interesting to me, he started to describe the public health system, that it's a catch-all system. It's a hospital of choice for many, but it's also the last resort, the opportunity for anyone to come and get health system attention. And I suddenly realized that what he does for the health industry, we do for landscape architecture. If everything, if landscape is about the connective element, the thing that we are all a part of, his work at the hospital is the same thing for medicine and how people get attention for their health issues. So we hit it off, and it's been a great experience. This is our design for the new campus. Presently, the campus is over here. There's a land swap happening with IUPUI. Wishard is getting this portion. This is an old Olmsted Brothers landscape that was butchered, and they're trying to put back together. And so this is the new hospital campus that we had a part of. And as is typical with our work, we go, no landscape architect should stay within their contract boundaries. Always go beyond, because the systems are too big, right? It's always about what happens beyond the site. So in this case, we're looking really about issues of Indiana and how water moves through the system and where we are relative to the upland stream versus the downhill side of that stream. What the soils are like and how that's going to affect the site because we're all fill there, what the wind conditions and temperature ranges are, how we're going to work within the city boundaries, the downtown district of Indianapolis. This is a 5-minute walk, 10-minute walk, et cetera, going through here. And so where are we relative to other things within the city, including open space systems along the White River. And Indianapolis is very interesting from my point of view because they have these district systems going on. The Greenway Trails and the Cultural Trail, and we began to develop our own district. It's called the Wellness District, and we would have the Wellness Trail. And so how do we knit that into Indianapolis? So the Wellness Trail would literally come right through campus and become a part of it, and we began to talk about how to define that. But campuses are about other things like road systems as well, and how you get primary, secondary, and tertiary movement through that. They're about public transit because, again, this is about everyone having the opportunity to come to the hospital to receive service. And it's about bicyclists and how do you move them through that. But it's also about wellness and healthful being. And one of the things, when I was waiting for Matt, the CEO, to come and meet with me down in the lobby for my first interview with him, I really realized something, and perhaps I'm a little bit more naive than I thought I was at the time, but there was a similar characteristic between many of the people that were coming to the hospital, and that happened to be about their largesse. They were huge people coming. And part of the issue for healthful living is being able to consume good food, right? It actually makes a difference in our lives. And so that became a theme of this development, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So we did things like exploring where the gateway to the campus would be and what the thresholds and the center of the campus would be, and came up with this plan that was as much about connectivity to the adjacent campuses as it was about the singularity of Wishard. So we began to look at what's the profile of the street and where do we do biofiltration gardens and how do we move the natural systems or rediscover the natural systems through this site, where we would begin to collect water and what our stormwater strategies would be, and how they would represent themselves in that landscape. And indeed, because we're adjacent to both a canal and a river on this site, we redesigned the grading of the hospital so that we created this sort of natural levee around it. So if there was a flood condition, the hospital would not be in jeopardy. And the stormwater system would be designed to actually capture water and reuse it on site, but also allow it to be socially purposeful as well, as we did here at Yale. And the landscape would resemble the regional characteristics, be appropriate to the site, but recall certain issues. But there were roughly 5 concepts that we latched onto. One of them was this attitude. I don't know whether any of you have seen Angels in America. It's a profound play by Tony Kushner One of the main characters is not real at all. It's actually the angel Bethesda and the fountain at Central Park. And that's her there touching ground. And you know, it's said, whosoever then first stepped in after the troubling of the water was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. And that was an incredibly profound statement. I'm a secular humanist, you know, but this was an interesting thought to me in how we could use water to actually inform healthful living as part of it. Wishard has an incredible history of dietary discoveries and how that relates very specifically to Michael Pollan's writings right now, again, about healthful living and how we can move forward. That it also has an incredible art collection, a lot of steel paintings, and how art could be infused into the new campus. I like this particular piece, remember to take your daily dose of color. And each of those colors is actually derived from vegetative matter. So it's, again, linking systems back together again. And then finally, how we could use words within the campus to actually create profound effect. And also cultivate the identity of that campus and make it regionally appropriate to it. So just to give you a sense of a couple of the spaces, I do want to say that it's been our extraordinary opportunity at OLIN to work not only as sort of the visionary of the landscape overall, but to collaborate with local practitioners, Ratio, Context, 9Bark, to come up with great spaces like this one. This is actually the Sky Farm, and it sits on top of the clinic building, and it's designed to be a productive landscape. And that productive landscape really, literally is nourishing of act and nourishing of food, because the idea is that you take that food and bring it down to the plaza at the form of a cafe where you would consume it. And where people are used to French fries and fast food or frozen food and don't understand that you actually go to a supermarket and can cook something fresh, that they might actually learn that it's very easy and it's very affordable and it's very valuable to their system themselves as a nourishing effect. So we're going to be, OLIN is responsible for the main public space of Wishard, and it's kind of a give back from the hospital to the community of Indianapolis, where we're looking to actually program it in such a way that it will inform people's daily lives. And so we've actually come up with a program chart that not only deals with the morning, the noon, afternoon, and evening effort of any particular open space, but what happens to it seasonally and how it will affect the community, the very diverse community of Indianapolis. And so, you know, it's helping them to understand what could take place. And a result of this work, Wishard is going to be hiring somebody to do just this, program their public spaces to inform people that come to the hospital, who may not come to the hospital for the service of that hospital, but may come because it's a great place to be. And that was part of our charge. You shouldn't necessarily want Wishard services to want to be there. So this is Wishard Commons, which is the space in front of the clinic. This is where that Sky Farm is at the top here. There's a great fountain that's being designed by OLIN and a good friend of ours, Jim Garland from Fluidity. This is where that notion of the troubled waters comes up. This fountain literally spews up water very rapidly to inform a beautiful geometric space, shape, and then it recedes quickly. And the only thing that is incised in it is that phrase, whosoever first steps in, so that the water just gets captured right there, and the only remnant water is just there, and then it disappears, and then the water fills up again. So it's very ephemeral. The idea is that it's just, if you see it, it's great. If you don't understand what it says, that's okay too. So this is the troubled waters fountain. The opposite side is a different water feature, also designed by Jim. It's called the Falls, and it's a feature of living water. It's actually got every type of bacteria you might find in nature growing in it, so we can grow plants in this water. But it also is intended to live or be used 365 days of the year. So in the wintertime, it might become quite extraordinary. And then there was this cafe idea that we wanted to have serving people food down there. And we showed them other representations. HOK had designed a beautiful, embracing international-style hospital. And we said, well, this folly, this cafe should be something significantly different. And so we were looking at I.M. Pei's work at the Louvre and at the Calder pieces in Chicago. And we're thinking about what that form might take, the cafe form. And we were looking to nature and the concept that a physician's garden is called a physic garden. and that physic is the root of physician, and it was always about plant material and how you would manipulate plant material to become that part of medicinal purpose. And so I think the state flower is the peony. I hope I got this right because I've been talking about it that way for a long time. And working with ratio architecture, we've developed a cafe that I think is going to be quite extraordinary. The trellis that embraces the street is right here, and this sort of opening flower form is a part of that cafe, and it will sit out there quite beautifully, I think, through the seasons. And so the notion is that this is going to be a space where everyone will want to be, not regardless of your intent to go get health services. So keep an eye on this one. It's under construction, and we're really excited about it, and it's right down the road from you, so watch for that. Another place that we wanted to show was Washington Canal Park. I'll just move through this one quickly. It's a 3-block-long park in the southeast district of Washington, D.C. There's the mall right there. There's President Obama, the Capitol. And it's a former bus depot. It's also, before that, it was a canal. It was literally the canal that ran through Washington, D.C. And so this 3 blocks, this is an economic driver. The idea was to use landscape to stimulate the growth of that portion of the southeast district of Washington, D.C. But it needed to be designed in such a way that it could accommodate a very changing neighborhood because it's being designed before people get there. And so you have to accommodate urban dwellers who you can't predict who they might be. They might be a young couple. There might be people with kids. There might be elderly folks. A very diverse community. So this is what we've come up with for the first, second, and third blocks. And I'm just going to take you through those real quickly. The third block is kind of reminiscent of Bryant Park. We took our lessons from Bryant Park and pulled them here, where you have this sort of open lawn plat for flexible opportunities like going to the movies at night. And this is something that we do all the time. In plan to scale, we chart out how many people can comfortably be in that space. It's a really great tool to use to help to explain what how it's going to feel to be there. Here, we are prime on this project, and we had a consultant, Studios Architecture out of DC, and Brian Pilot and a couple of other folks from there really listened to what we had to say about our desire to create pavilions in the park that had a relationship to the barge vocabulary that canals used to have. So they did a great job of designing pavilions for us. This is the third block pavilion. It's a simple cube where during the day a young kid will, for his summer job, will be vending chairs, kind of that concept for Bryant Park again, where you pay $2 and you give your license and you get a folding chair and you go and put it out on the lawn wherever you want it to be, and then when you're done with it, you bring back the chair, you get your license back, but he keeps the $2 to go back to school. And at night, it's going to glow, and it will glow relative to the number of people that are proximate to it. So the more people in the park, the more it's going to glow. The fewer people in the park, the less it's going to glow. So it's got that sort of wonderful interaction to it. The second block, we took our cues from our work in Wagner Park, where we wanted to design a place for kids to play, but not necessarily have gym equipment. No swings, no jungle gyms, things like that. But in Bryant Park, what we learned was, Cindy Sanders, my partner, had designed a beautiful bench around this. And unknowingly, she had created a place where young mothers and nannies took their charges during the day. So in the morning, we sort of realized that there are all these young people there, little kids, toddlers, that big. And what was happening was there's just limited apertures to get into the space. And what the parents and nannies were realizing was they had a big playpen. And that there was, if they stood at the places where the benches were open, they could prevent the kids from falling in the river. But so the folks who manage this park now bring out cartloads of toys, and at 10 in the morning, they literally dump the toys out, and the kids play, and at 5 o'clock, the management company puts it all back, and they store it in the pavilion that's adjacent to it. And so we decided, all right, well, that's what we're going to do down here, too. So here's that second pavilion, and it's going to house the fountain equipment for this beautiful water feature, but also the toys that will be played with here, so that kids will be having a great time and parents can come and watch carefully their kids play. There's also a great rain garden that moves through this, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The first block is the most civic of the blocks, and the people who did this was a public-private venture. They wanted a monumental fountain, so we designed for them an open joint fountain. But we also said we needed to have a cafe to stimulate this particular area, and they did that. And so the concept, there's that cube again rising up out of the ground. There's the fountain in the summertime. But we also wanted it to work in winter. And I sort of had this epiphany about what happens on canals in places like Amsterdam or up in Ottawa, if you're from there. People skate on canals, but it's a very different experience than skating on a round place. It's sort of linear, right? They just keep going back and forth along these linear parks. So we're designing the second linear skating rink in the United States. And we're really excited about this, what it's going to be like to be there. And you know, it has to do with coordinating how people come in. And then you have to design benches that accommodate the skating for the summertime. So figuring out what that course of action is going to be like. But we're very excited about this particular park. This is also under construction. So it's going to be done in about 1.5 years. So you might want to watch that one come up out of the ground. Designing the benches that go throughout, including the sort of snaking bench that captures part of the skating rink. Just a view from the street of the 3 pavilions. The interesting thing about landscapes in general now is that they never do one thing. They are living machines, all of them, and this is where you come into great civil engineering, figuring out how to collaborate with people about water systems. So this is literally a design of the park. So as much as you saw above ground, this is what's going to be happening below ground. And the great thing about this particular park is it's going to be one of the first that will actually capture not just within its own footprint, but go out into the community and tap into new and existing adjacent buildings. So we actually got permits to pipe under streets and go up to rooftops so that this living machine is going to be the stormwater management system for the entire district around it. Very different attitude than most other parks. This is the old King plan there's our site. There's the canal running through Washington, D.C. We took our inspiration for some of the site amenities from the Sino Canal, which is up in Georgetown. This is one of my favorite slides. This is the old canal in front of the still being built Capitol building. But the interesting thing is this canal only functioned for 2 years for all their effort. It just was getting so much sediment out of it. But that sediment clued me into what this could be in terms of a stormwater management system, and that is this great description of succession as well as cleansing. And so this is a design for the stormwater garden, and it literally fits right there. There you see it in the park. And it is about the primary, secondary, and tertiary characteristics of the Anacostia waterway that will clean the water for the park. And so it'll be habitable. You know, when there's no water in it, you can still get in that area. But the metrics for it, we hope, will be extraordinary. And every landscape now must have metrics to it. You cannot speak about landscapes without speaking about the metrics that it performs for us as a culture. And so whether they're social or economic or environmental, you should always be thinking about what it's going to do beyond just being a great place to be. So keep your eye on this one. I think it's going to be very exciting. We're really thrilled. I have a great team working with me on this, and I'm thrilled to be working with them. Just a quick look at a 400-acre quarry. See, we're going up in scale here. This is actually an active limestone quarry in Texas, 600 acres. It's a blighted site. They're still excavating limestone. It's surrounded by a 30-foot berm, so it's downtown San Antonio, but nobody knows that it's there really, except for the towers of the thing. And the wonderful benefactor of this, he's an industrialist, and it's not the sort of robber baron of old days. He actually wants to leave this family business to his children, but do so as a productive landscape. Not just one of excavation, of taking, but of one of giving as well. So working with the denuded soils, which are little, we started to develop this. And this is actually just a portion of the 600 acres. The 600 acres is like really big outside of this. But this is the first effort that we're going to be doing down there. And it's looking at the landscape systems of that region of Texas and trying to figure out how to design a new landscape within it. And it's really like designing a landscape over structure, which is something that we're very good at because the limestone ledge that we're building upon will be like a roof, right? So we have to figure out the systems that will reinvigorate this to become something quite spectacular in the end. And that those systems should overlay on top of each other to become some fabulous machine. And they're shooting for platinum with this one, so it's an extraordinary goal for a landscape like this. But you have photovoltaics, you have geothermal, you have a landscape of productivity that actually feeds the business inside of it. There's a pedagogic goal of bringing students here to learn about the systems that are taking place. Even the parking lot works differently than just a parking lot. Really, in the creation of this new lake, one of the things that they wanted, the guys who were work within the factory wanted to be able to fish for bass. And if you know anything about bass fishing, and you probably know more than I do, it requires a great deal of clean water, right? They're a very clean water fish. So in the creation of this, we had to create ledges and appropriate fauna and flora within it that would support the bass population. But we also decided to cut sections away of it so that you could literally go into the lake and look into that living system. And then finally, I just wanted to, if you were at the Waldheim lecture yesterday, he talked about the art competition. I was really thrilled. We were called by some colleagues, friends of ours in London, who asked us to enter an open competition, but with us as prime. And again, landscape architects are becoming prime on more projects than not. You should begin to realize that that leadership skill is required. We did this entry for the ARC International Wildlife Crossing Infrastructure in collaboration with Burrell Happold out of London, their bridge department out of London, and Explorations Architecture out of Paris, and Applied Ecological Sciences out of Conshohocken. So it was a very diverse team, but it's important to note that it's a team, that we bring on as leaders the people that do things that we don't know how to do, but know enough about their discipline to understand that it's the right thing to do, to bring them on as a part of our team. So OLIN was prime, and Burrell Happold Explorations and Applied Ecological Services were the consultants. And we created this fantastic vocabulary for wild crossing, which was the name of our project. And this is the challenge. Every year in the United States, there's an extraordinary collision between wildlife and vehicles. And the static system that is dynamic as well of the infrastructure of our highway system is in a direct compromise to the wildlife corridors. So these living dynamic systems are threatened because road ecology, that Richard Foreman and others have worked with, is an incredibly challenging condition for us. And the thing is, our roads are our economic value, right? We move things on roads. We create our economy on roads, moving things across. Interestingly enough, the biggest supporter, the industry that's the biggest supporter of this is insurance companies. They were one of the main supporters of this particular project, this particular competition, because it's incredibly costly. Can you imagine what happens when you collide with a bighorn sheep? Megafauna are megafauna, right? They are incredibly big animals. And so the site is 184.7, I think, Andy, is that what it was? It's like on I-70 on the West Vale Pass. So you see the scale of the road. But the interesting thing was they had certain criteria for the program of that. Cost-effective design, ecologically responsive, flexible and modular, very important to our design, the capacity of being flexible and modular so that it could move as necessary. Adaptive to wildlife in dynamic systems, largely as they are affected by global warming. Educational, so it should have a pedantic purpose. Ecologically appropriate to habitat. It should have traffic pullouts for part of that pedagogic purpose. It should accommodate a new rail system that they want to put in between Denver and Vail. It should accommodate 2 additional lanes of traffic, so 6 lanes of traffic, 2 lanes of train that you have to span. And it should have educational content. It also had the jury, of which Waldheim was one of them, had certain criteria that they were looking for. Innovative design, be inspirational in its typology. It should be educational. It should be adaptive, capable of change. There should be a synthesis between all of these agenda issues. It should be a part of spectacular infrastructure. That is, it should be iconic in some way. Highly sustainable, thoughtful resolutions of all of these demands, and be cost-effective. And so that there was a sensitivity towards the capital costs. So this was our position for the bridge. My colleague Andy Leach is here. He was instrumental in the design of this as well. You'll see here in the solid lines the mapped wildlife corridors. That is, we were able to see where the wildlife were moving through observation. And you can see also that they exist on the opposite side of the road, and you can see why 184.7 is one of the most collision-generating places in the United States. And this site was chosen specifically because it was mapped as a collision point. So we designed our overlook place here. There's the parking area to pull off, and you would walk up. Actually, you wouldn't walk up because we were using topography. This is simply at the same elevation as you move. This bridge is at a lower elevation, so you could look out over it. But we looked to the toroid shape, the donut shape, as being that universal shape that we could pull from. And the idea was that whether you were in Vail or in the Badlands or in the tall grass crossings or in the Blue Ridge Mountains, or whether you were in Europe or somewhere else, if you wanted to create a wildlife crossing, you could go onto the ARC website, the FTP site, and actually pull from it pieces of shape that would inform and fit the landscape of your choice. So our toroid was about 100 times larger than the bridge itself. Here are the 4 lanes turned into 6 with 2 lanes of rail, and the supports for our bridge, and the drainage system that was incorporated into it that moved to the sides. A diagrid structure, which is one of those incredible natural structures that is incredibly rigid and strong. The parapet fencing that went along the edge of the bridge and out into the landscape. This is just a stick frame analysis of all the potential stresses for that bridge. And then finally, not only was the design of the bridge itself modular, but the design of the landscape was modular, and we'll talk about that. So here's that diagrid structure with its reservoir receiving points for water, and how these modular GRP containers of landscape would fit into it and would be designed to be appropriate for the particular types of megafauna we were desiring to facilitate. And the idea was not to attract the megafauna, right? The idea was to create normalcy. Normalcy, that is, that would allow animals to just feel that it's appropriate for them to move along this corridor. It wasn't about attracting them. It was simply about helping them to feel normal. And so in creating this sort of Pringle shape, if you will, it did many different things. It allowed for acoustic, the fact that trucks and cars make a lot of noise and frighten wildlife. It allowed us that buffer. It brought sunlight underneath so that you could see, so it was no longer a landscape tunnel, but it was actually a bridge floating over top of it. And it addressed all the different conditions appropriate to this area. Just a cross-section crossing. These are drawings that help to prove to that we had met the criteria. But the fact that we would then incorporate mesic grasslands, wet meadows, mesic shrublands, xeric shrublands, spruce and fir forests, the conditions that surrounded this particular site would then allow for particular megafauna to feel comfortable. So here we are working with moose and bear and lynx and marten, and the spruce and fir forest is that area along which they would move. And so just watch this sort of diagram right here as it begins to develop. So the xeric shrubland would then be added for 5 of the 6 particular types of megafauna that we were trying to be attentive to. And then the mesic shrubland for 3 of them, wet meadow for the Canada lynx and others, mesic grassland again, xeric grassland. And the idea was that as things change, that is, as global warming created stresses, say the lynx doesn't want to move through this zone anymore, and we don't have to use the mesic shrubland cells within this bridge, we can then replace them to work with the next type of megafauna that we think will be appropriate for it. So the idea was that there would be change that was possible, not only the creation of these pods, but that they would be useful to the megafauna. And then as the change happened, you could literally lift them out, scrub them out, and restart again. And so that you didn't have to scrape the entire bridge clean, you could just pull out those pods that were no longer effective. So here's our finding the crossing image. There's the bridge here. And it looks like the landscape just moves up and over, and there's the highway. And so here you are within the wildlife crossing, And you can see the parapet fence there, the Pringle shape, edge. And the idea is that it feels like a valley. The notion is that it's normalcy. It's the condition within which these animals live anyway. But at the same time, it becomes this iconic form that people on the road understand to be something different, a threshold, a gateway, a symbolic gesture about the relationship between dynamic systems and the static systems of the road. This is our fresh prints of Vale. And then finally, our learning curve, which was part of that pedantic or pedagogic purpose of this. The idea is that there are video monitors here on the bridge, and that you could see what was happening, although you could not see it live, because we didn't want hunters to be here saying, oh, there's my stock, I'm going to go get that guy. They would just be non-date stamped images of what has been happening with sample pods adjacent to it so that people could understand what that landscape there was actually about. Our rendered plan for the bridge from above. This is one of Andy's extraordinary models. He is probably the most adept model maker I've met, and did a great job with this particular piece. And so for us, the issue is about change and why you shouldn't be frightened of new ideas. And if you want to see what happened, you're welcome to go to the ARC competition website. We did not win, unfortunately. I think we should have, but those are the spoils of a competition. So all of those things being said, how do we end up with this all the time? What is it about this system that doesn't work? Please tell me that you will never design a cul-de-sac. Cul-de-sacs don't work. That's a dead-end system. Literally, if you want things to move smoothly, you create many different connections. And that's what you have to start thinking about in this world, the connectivity that we aspire to have. Not just between our wild systems, our ecological systems, but between ourselves. Systems between ourselves are always in jeopardy, and our work should always be about promoting communication between ourselves. When we communicate with each other, we learn more about each other, and we understand each other, and we become less frightening to each other. And things become much more aspirational in that way. And the challenge for you is this. I didn't grow up with this. You guys are growing up with this. I don't know half the stuff that's up there. You guys do. It's all the stuff that allows you to become this. This is not connectivity, folks. I know you're talking to each other even now between, the stuff that's going on at the table, but that's not what it's about. It's about this. It's about figuring out, this is outside of our studio. Our studio is right up here. This is our design for Independence Mall. And Independence Mall is not so much about, it has historical purpose. The idea was to actually speak for the Park Service in this regard, but it's actually about bringing people together. My big, hairy, audacious goal, my BHAG in life is this, to create a place in which very many people can come together and do so successfully. So for me, success looks like a space that's well attended. And the idea is that if I create a space, it should be approachable to many different people. So say a chemistry professor and a young protester. And by the act of creating a place in which they feel comfortable enough to sit together, they might sit underneath the dappled light of a tree and sit next to each other, and as a result of sitting next to each other, have a conversation. And as a result of that conversation, come up with an idea, and that idea 10 years down the road saves the world. I will have been successful because I created the place in which that idea could take place, because communication took place. It's an incredibly powerful tool that we have to facilitate the success of our future. And I want you to think about that as you're moving forward, and I invite you to come visit us on the web, and if you want, in our studio. Although it's just passed, we do have an internship program at OLIN. It's a competitive internship program. And I think this year it closed around March 4th or something like that. But for those of you who are going into the summer before your final year, this is something that you might want to strive for. We have had a strong relationship with Purdue. I want to end with this slide because we've had, I think, 27 now Purdue interns come through for part of their program. Starting with Mario here, and Brian's there now. There's Nick, who just introduced me. But 27 people have come through, including Sarah, who's with us today. And that has been an incredibly satisfying relationship for us at OLIN. It's been, the great thing for us has been that many of those Purdue interns, there's Casey, who's here in the audience as well. They have been not just successful internships, I think, for those who attended, but they've been successful for us because we've learned a great deal. And many of those people have come back to work for OLIN. And that, to me, is the measure of success, that they actually wanted to come back and learn with us into the future. So that's all I have to say. I just wanted to say congratulations on being landscape architects. Move forward with pride. Be great.